All right, class. First knot for this class is one that you already know. It's called the overhand knot. You use it to typically tie your shoes and so forth. It's ancient, it's not as thousands of years old, and its primary use for us in forestry, and in particular things like tree climbing, rock climbing, and so forth, is as a stop knot. So certain knots, or bends or hitches and so forth, if you pull really hard on the standing or sort of fixed end of the line or the working or loose end of the line, you can actually pull the line through a knot in that line, and then the knot just comes apart. And if that knot is what is securing your harness to your climbing gear or your other personal protective equipment, then you're dead. So it's important to put sort of bulges in the line above where it might pull through a knot that you are relying on for your safety. Those are called stop knots. And the very simplest of those, again, is the overhand knot. So with the working end of the line, you take the working end and form a bite or a bend in the line, and then make a loop, and then pass the working end of the line through the loop that you just made in the bite. Do you recognize this? This is an overhand knot. It's also pretty tough to untie when it has been pulled very, very, very tight. So stop knots are typically quick and just tied as part of another rig or setup or harness. So the idea here is not to tie this at a point in the line where you've got very high tension or pulling force in the direction of the working end and in the direction of the standing or fixed or attached end, because that knot will tighten way down, and as it tightens, this puts additional force on the fibers around the overhand knot, and eventually that can weaken the line. So that's called the efficiency of a knot. And overhand knots are 50% efficient. They weaken the line as you tighten them down. One other thing to keep in mind with an overhand knot is the idea that the overhand knot can suffer from problems with capsizing. So capsizing is when you pull on the knot in sort of an unusual direction. So we would think of this overhand knot. Again, here's how to tie it. You take the working end of the line, form a bite, form a loop out of the bite, pass the working end through the loop created in the bite, and then trim the knot or clean it or pull it gently tighter. There's your stop knot. This is going to be much safer for not pulling through a knot that is tying the line to your harness. Now the rope can't slip through. But again, in cases where you have high tension on the working end and on the standing end at the same time, that's going to tighten this knot down real hard. And in some cases, when you tighten an overhand knot down and then pull on the knot from an unconventional direction, so not in the usual lines of force, the knot will capsize. And that's when the knot, like a boat hull that is capsizing, rolls over as it goes. So watch the fibers. As I'm sort of rolling the knot in my fingers, we can actually sort of partially roll the overhand knot down the line a little bit. And that can be used to tighten it. You can also loosen very, very hard bound knots or knotty knots by capsizing the knot apart from itself and kind of rolling the fibers away from each other. This loosens the knot a little bit so that you can pull it apart. Okay, so let's review. Working end, standing end, the bite. This is an overhand knot. Make a U shape or a bite in the middle section, called the bite, and make a loop out of the bight, pass the working end of your rope or line or string or cord through the loop that you made, and gently clean it to finish this overhand knot. You capsize the knot to tighten it or loosen it by rolling the fibers sort of around the curve of the cross section of the rope, and you can use that to tighten or loosen it. Okay, so again, overhand knot, this is a good stop knot for making sure that your lifeline doesn't pass through where your lifeline binds to your harness or other personal protective equipment.